Good morning. Good morning. Carrie's going to be a hard act to follow. She was so high energy and stuff. Look at that.
You're the only bear on only a tour.
Let me start by saying that I had more positive feedback and comments from that ad than any other advertising I did. Now, the direct mail piece was a little different because that was really putting it in everybody's hands. But as far as other media outlets, I had more people say, hey, I saw you on the screen at the mall, or hey, I saw you at the coffee shop. So it's not to endorse a media, but it really is a good deal. So, hey, thanks for inviting us this morning. I brought a couple of guests, which I'll introduce in just a couple of minutes, but I was asked to speak on, what is the city doing to help small business? And that was that's a great question, because when we came into office, I say we because there was a 60% turnover on your city council 2 years ago. So when we came into office 2 years ago, we kind of mixed things up a little bit, decided to restructure priorities. And with help from strategic planning sessions and community feedback, our strategic plan moved economic development and support of local business up to the top. So what we wanted to do is through policy, not so much programs at that time, but through policy, make it easier for businesses to do business. And since then, we've done a lot of really, I think, progressive things, and asking the chamber to be involved in some of the decision-making processes, how we can use their feedback to adjust policy or to revisit policy and make it easier for businesses to do business. One of the other things that we did, this council decided to move forward with an internal department, an economic development department that would assist building the atmosphere to grow business organically and to bring in new business on major corridors, and through through policy and helping mom and pops get a good solid footing. So this is where my guests come in. I have asked the city manager, Ted Voorhees, and deputy city manager, Rochelle Smalltoney, who oversees the economic development area, to join me today so they can more specifically talk about, outside of policy, what's the city doing to help small business. So I'll introduce them at this time.
Well, thank you, Mayor.
You may want this. Let me crown you.
You were crowned at the meeting. We had a local pastor give an invocation at our meeting Monday night and made reference to the only word in the Bible for mayor was king. So that was pretty powerful. Well, good morning. Really energized group, and the mayor's right. Following the presentation of the prior speaker is going to be difficult, so I'm going to really try and pump it up. I know this Million Cups movement, the Kaufman Foundation, has really been great nationally to help understand the importance of entrepreneurship, entrepreneurs, small business. That is the foundation of America. I mean, we were a nation. I'm reading 1776 right now. David McCullough's, his version of the founding of the country and all that stuff, and he really talks about all the people who had to come together, and it was a nation of small business persons. I mean, that's what we're all about. That's the foundation of our nation. Now, we'd love to get a BMW plant here in Fayetteville because we provide a whole lot of jobs, and then spin off and help create a lot of other businesses, small businesses, create an environment for entrepreneurs. We'd love that. Not in the cards at the moment, but we do have some people working in that space. So let me talk about it a little bit. We have the Fayetteville Cumberland Economic Development Commission working on what we call, some of you probably heard this term, whale hunting. The big corporation. Someday somebody's going to come to Fayetteville and build another factory of some sort. I mean, we know our biggest factory in the community is the old Kelly Springfield, now Goodyear plant. Hired a lot of people work there. Can have a full career. It's a big corporation. They invest in the community. We have a number of other corporations around. Maybe we don't hear from them quite as much because they're kind of tucked away doing their thing. DuPont has a large operation kind of down south on the county line. They've had some corporate splits and what have you. So now Chemours is their brand. You'll be hearing more of that as you track Wall Street. Nita Gelatin, a Japanese firm, has a factory here. They make gelatin products. They had a big expansion a couple years ago. Purolator, you heard of that brand? How many people have heard of Purolator? Yeah, they make oil filters. They're the first filter makers in the world. They kind of created that whole market, like 100 years ago. So we have some big companies here. Unfortunately, manufacturing is a tough sector these days. We do think there's a resurgence in America. And so we work in that space through that EDC group. Half of the folks there are appointed by the city council and half are appointed by the commissioners, the county commissioners. But then there's also an appointment from the Community Development Foundation, which is a membership group some of you may have heard of. You join by putting equity into it, donations, and they have a fund and they'll help incent businesses that want to move here. But usually in that sort of big manufacturing type space, that's kind of where that works. So that's the group, and Russ Robertson is the executive director of the staff. There's a small staff of 4 or 5. One person deals with relationship management with current businesses like the ones I talked about. Cargill's another one. Some of you know about Cargill on a river road. They make salad oil. One of the biggest salad oil manufacturers in the United States, right here in Fayetteville. If you go to a restaurant and get salad, or maybe probably half the products in the local grocery stores that use soybean oil is probably pressed at the factory here in Fayetteville. So that's what they do. Russ does the kind of runs the group, does the recruiting. Joanna works for him, does the sort of site visits, goes out to meet other companies in other parts of the country and tries to get them to come here. So that's the whale hunting operation. So now let's go back to entrepreneurs. Lexi's here from Seed. How many people know about Seed? Yeah, right. A bunch of you probably got your business plans, assistance from them, or maybe some access to Small Business Administration loans. Who knows? They have been a nonprofit in this community for a long time, really focused on helping small businesses start. So we have some of that infrastructure here, and then there's the big whale hunting, the sort of how do we help people start up. But there's been a space that local government has been concerned about but hasn't been able to operate in for some time. And that's the space of really going into place-based economic development and doing more focused effort to try to put deals together on the ground. So right now the market is handling areas like Ramsey Street. We've seen a lot of excitement going on Ramsey Street, right? Freddy's just went up, and Panera and Starbucks and all these sort of national brands are coming in there. Anybody excited about the new Harris Teeter that's going to go in up there?
Here, yes.
Yeah, I just went to the one in Pinehurst, not because I'm abandoning shopping in Fayetteville, but because I have a son who plays baseball and his team works out over there. So I drive over there maybe once a week or so, and that thing opened up, and I was like, wow, so here's a place I can sit instead of sitting in my car and read or watch TV, and I mean, it's pretty cool. So I'm looking forward to that. So the market is taking care of North Ramsey Street pretty well. Lots of stuff is happening. Business begets business begets business. But there are some other corridors where the market isn't powerful enough on its own to have the desired results as fast as we would want them to come about. Murchison Road, that's an area where there's been underinvestment. It's historically African American community. And I think we all know that there's a legacy of underinvestment in some parts of our communities in the South. You know, I mean, that's just that's history. So what can we do to overcome that? Bragg Boulevard. Some things are happening, some things aren't happening. That's sort of a legacy, important corridor for us. But we've got a lot of older buildings and some marginal uses there. Could be an opportunity for some entrepreneurs to go in there because the rents are low. But you also have sort of the, well, but you know, is it driving enough traffic? Is that really where I want to be? Is that where the action is? Hard to know. Rayford Road, thriving. Still parts of it, though, could look better. We have a lot of citizen survey data that get frustrated, saying, oh, you know, the streets, there's too much trash on our streets. You go back and you look at it, it turns out there's not actually any trash. It's just things don't look that great because people haven't paved their parking lots, they don't really have landscaping, the awning's old, the sign is old or whatever. So it's how can we get that to turn around? All right, so I've kind of laid it out, the difference between these corridors. And you know, where the market is successful, the last thing the government wants to do is get in the middle of that and get in the way of that and mess it up, right? So we want to make sure that we are supportive of businesses that want to develop and that want to come into that corridor and build that Harris Teeter can get built as quickly as possible, right? So we're working to update and automate a lot of our permitting processes. We put in a position called our developer advocate, so that if you have a project, you can go to that person and say, look, I want you to help me from the beginning to the end, understand and push me through the process. It is complicated. I can't solve that problem. The reality is the most complex thing we do is development. And that's because we are required to enforce the state building code, which we didn't write, and we can't amend, the fire code, and then we have our local zoning regulations, which are not, they're complicated. I mean, you know, what goes where and all that. Then we've got stormwater regulations, a bunch of that is federally and state imposed. And then we have DOT, and they have a lot of rules about how traffic needs to work. And if we don't get that right, you know, we are one of those communities that has sort of suffered from bad road planning or lack of road planning, and so we really can't ignore that because it'll just get worse. So you try to layer all that together in one process, it's a little bit complicated. So that's why we have the developer advocate to help move you through and find out where the log jams are so we can break that down and move forward. So that as small business owners, entrepreneurs, you may or may not have to come into contact with that process, but we want you to know that if you do get into the building and development process, as opposed to just, you know, kind of being a tenant in somebody else's place where they have to worry about that, come see us and ask for the developer advocate. Marcia Bryant is her name, and she can help push through that process. So that's one thing we're doing to help people through that. But otherwise, you know, we don't want to mess up kind of North Ramsey Street. But if the market alone was solving our problems in the Murchison corridor, in the you know, Bragg Boulevard corridor, then it would already be solved. So, well, it's not. So what can we do to incent or catalyze change at a faster pace? And that's where our new department comes in. The Economic and Business Development Department is going to be really focused on place-based economic development, where we work to try to figure out, you know, what are the gaps in the retail world or the service world in those areas. What would the market support? And can we then recruit businesses, small businesses, entrepreneurs, local businesses to think about, well, gee, can I open a second location? Or would my business be better off if we were in that corridor? And how can we close the gap on financing that opportunity? We're looking to develop programs that help buy inventory, that do facade improvements, that help you with upfits, and that sort of thing. So that's the kind of stuff that we're going to be developing. We're going to also be looking at opportunities to assemble parcels if there are problems there, if there's some street access issues, those are the kinds of things that we think government can play a role in that sort of place-based economic development. We're not here to replace the great work that our other nonprofits and business development entities are doing, like SEED. We have partnerships with them, for example, on how we can sometimes use federal funds. We get community development block grant money. And so if some people qualify based on income, then, or where they want to locate, then we can help funnel some of those funds to help start business. But they are limited. And so that's why we need a group like SEED to kind of help us sort through that and make sure that we provide services to all. But what we do hope to do with this new department is do this corridor placemaking work that up till now no one's really been doing. So I hope that gives you an overview of how we hope to fill the gaps, that we've got the whale hunting going on with the county, we've got our local entrepreneurial development climate going on with our nonprofits. I know Methodist University does work in that space as well, and here at Fayetteville Tech we've got work going on in that space, and then we're going to be working to try to do place-based work in areas that are kind of underserved. Rochelle, did you want to add anything to that? I know Susan Monroe went out to get a slide stick to show some more details, but she isn't back yet. But I hope I gave you kind of a framework, and I'm happy to take questions, and Rochelle may have a few words for you here as well.
Thank you.
By the way, while I was talking, not that folks were being rude, I noticed eyes kept going up over here.
Thank you. We should be on the screen, which isn't a bad idea. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm Rochelle Smontoni, and I'm Deputy City Manager over the Community Investment Portfolio, which this new economic and business development, I'm going to get knighted or queen rather than king. But anyway, so let's talk a little bit about the gap that the city manager just spoke about. It is true that, of course, historically there are parts of this city, as with any city, for a variety of reasons, tend to be left behind. And so that does have a very depressing and negative impact on the city overall. And so while we were thinking about this long continuum of economic development for Fayetteville and what does that really mean, it's very obvious that there are certain areas of the city that truly have been left behind. And so within this gap, though, are other specific needs. And we know that within the gap there are entrepreneurs, right, who can play a very important part of bringing communities back. And so while you have partners who are also working throughout the city, there is an opportunity to really do a great deal more hand-holding, if you will, looking for those kinds of incentives that can really help people, the type of education, getting you prepared, the business planning, the credit corrections, all those kinds of things that are really important to any business, but especially for those businesses that tend to have an opportunity to get their start in some of those places. And so with the Economic and Business Development Department, we do have a marketing and business manager who is very experienced, very well known throughout the Fayetteville community, who we talked into coming out of retirement to really help this very special population. And her name is Susan Monroe, who sits in the back. Susan tends to be very quiet, low-key, and I know that I'm going to be in trouble because I have certainly pointed to her. But we now have this philosophy about no wrong door. And so for any entrepreneur in the city, it's our belief that regardless of where you interact with local government, with city government, whether it's in development services, permitting inspections, all those other regulatory departments, those people know that if you're a business owner, then we need to refer you to Ms. Monroe. And then Ms. Monroe goes through an intake process, assesses exactly where you are in your business preparation and planning, and then makes a determination as to who or what resource in the community is actually better suited to help move you along. And so that's primarily, I mean, I'm oversimplifying this, but that is really what the role of the marketing and business manager is. So for example, you may be an entrepreneur who has a business plan. She's reviewed it. You know, it looks like it's going to make sense to a lender. And then you're ready to be moved on to one of the lending partners. And so that's what exactly Seed is. Seed is a lending partner, a very important partner in this community that can connect you with financial resources. Because every business, right, we can think of a few that may not need cash, but most of them in America really do need cash. But they also need people who can believe in what their mission is and can support what they're doing and then help guide them along the way. So Seed is one of those partners that Ms. Monroe would refer you to. As far as like getting through the regulatory processes of the city, it is a very difficult process if you've never been through it before, and especially if you have a very complex problem that we're working on. But central to all of that, though, is life safety. And the way that affects your bottom line is if you, as the business owner or the property owner, right, decides to skirt whatever the regulations are. And there's some very catastrophic, event that happens in your business. And then your insurance company starts to get involved because all these claims are coming, right, holding you responsible for whatever injury or damage has been done. And believe it or not, in that whole process, they start looking back to see, well, what did the building inspector do or not do to give you guidance? Now, if you haven't interacted with our regulatory departments, then you're on your own. Because there is no record that you have gone through the required regulatory process. And so what does that mean, for your business? Well, certainly it could threaten you and put you out of business financially and maybe even affect you personally. So what I'm trying to say is, as cumbersome and maybe pain-wrenching as it might be, you're better off going through that process than not, because you never know when an accident is going to happen or anything like that. So, yes, sir.
Just a question, if you don't mind, ma'am.
Sure.
Why does it take maybe 7 to 9 months for us to go from start to end? You keep telling us about going through the process, and I like it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are starting a business and 9 months later, all this time was wasted, we'll say just waiting and waiting. What are you doing to help us reduce that time down to here so we can get going faster?
Sure. And there are a lot of reasons, I think, that fills in those spaces. Sometimes owners will contract with general contractors, and they don't always keep business owners, informed of where they are in the process. There's a lot of information exchange that goes back and forth to make sure that when the plans are being reviewed, all of the required information is in there. So there's that tug that goes back and forth. One of the things that we are trying to do is to make this a very transparent process. We have struggled a bit over the past year of implementing what we now call FayWorks. But the idea is that you can go online, once it's up and running, you, the business owner, or whoever it is that has an interest in that permitting application or that inspections, will be able to go online to see exactly where you are in that process. And that tends to speed things, we think, along, because you don't get into this back and forth between the general contractor or the designer and the city staff about what kinds of things you have to have in place in order for the project to move on. The other thing that we hope that software will do, it will give you an opportunity to call up for your inspection exactly when you need it real time. And then the inspector will be able to schedule that inspection. You'll know exactly when the person is coming. You'll have your proper staff there to allow them to come in and do the inspection. And then, you know, that keeps it moving as well. So there are certain things that we know in this whole process that tend to back up and log jam. And we think that with a successful implementation of that software, that certainly will reduce that 6-7 month period of time down to something that's a little bit more reasonable. Am I
We
running out
have
of
one
time?
time for one more question.
Okay.
Okay, so going back to what the mayor and the city planner, not directly at you, because I figure this is probably wide open at this point in time. All right, so we're talking about manufacturing jobs, because we know that the education levels and we were talking about in place and certain things, but we run across problems with regulatory. You mentioned Starbucks and all that other stuff, but that's minimum wage, very low paying jobs. What are we doing? How do we, you know, the manufacturing in Kelly Springfield / Goodyear is fine, but with manufacturing going to more robotics animation, how are we encouraging that within, say, FTCC, Fayetteville State, or Methodist, so that we build that nucleus of skilled workers that we can point there?
Well, I'll take a stab at that. And then,
All right.
so within this whole realm of partnership, certainly we recognize the educational institutions. I think that we're blessed in this community to have those kind of resources, whether they be students who are coming out of those institutions. Sometimes the challenge, obviously, is keeping them, right? I mean, I have grown children who I wanted, and grown and children kind of goes together, right? But nonetheless, you try to keep them closer at home where they can really grow and benefit. That's one of the challenges we have. But in partnership, I think the idea of strengthening the workforce programming that's done at FTCC and FSU, so that when Rush Robertson, the corporate whale hunter, goes out and represents the city and what we have to offer a community in terms of a community to a potential employer, this is the kind of workforce that is prepared to do the kind of things that you need as a corporation.
All right, well, I'm going to do a follow-up on that. Is that, as a business owner, two things that really bother me is regulatory. There's a cost there. There's my time, there's cost, so where we address that. And then is hiring skilled workers, and then the churn. All right, so we know that we have, who pointed it out the last meeting, that we've got between 20% to 30% of this population churns out every year. So that's, are there policies in place so that we continue to go into that? And then, how do we address these?
Okay. So the, Ms. Maltoni referenced partnerships. Dr. Larry Keene here at Fayetteville Tech has been a great partner of the Alliance. In fact, serve on the same board together for economic development, and has recognized and realized the importance of staying up front on some of these trends. In fact, many of you that are familiar with the school know about the auto body repair facility that just opened up. That's one of those things where the community realized that there was a niche to be had, that we were not serving the population well, and Dr. King went out and did something for the education of students. that will go with the trend or the community need in order to
You know,
employ
the
them.
repurposing of certain
So-
skill sets.
And as Mr. Voorhees had referred to, you know, the whale hunters, as they are looking at, and Sanderson Farms may be a sore subject, but I'll bring that up. With the Sanderson Farms group, what would be needed in order to give some technical training to potential employees that can, you know, head straight into work. So that partnership is there. Dr. King, Fayetteville Tech has been right on top of it. Unfortunately, we just had a tough time landing those whales. And that's one of the things that you know, again, I believe the city council is really looking at. It is a top priority for us. We also have partnerships with the county, and, you know, they didn't want to,
Yeah, don't talk about that.
yeah, so, anyway, you know, we are on top of it. In fact, quite often, the Alliance, or what was, you know, formerly known as the Alliance, has come to us with some potential deals, and this city council has really gone all out to try to recruit that business and industry into Fayetteville. I mean, and what we can do, you know, legally is, you know, we've got a very narrow scope of things that we can do. What we have offered to do is rebate some of the tax money that's paid. So it's not the incentive is not money out of pocket. It is future tax revenue that would be received that we're just rebating back. So it's not costing the community taxpayers anything to offer that incentive. But if they're putting our residents to work or bringing in those engineers into the community or those VPs, those managers that have a higher salary base, it will help us all out. So that was a great question. Thank you. Did you have something earlier, ma'am?
Just earlier, I was visualizing, where is Harris Teeter on Ramsey Street? That was the only thing.
It will be at the entrance of King's Grant.
At King's Grant, all the way down.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I haven't seen any.
Hadn't started
It
yet.
hadn't even started. They're
Oh,
it's just
okay.
in the planning stage right now, but they've announced.
That was
Mayor
something.
Robertson, I'll take the last question. 30 seconds. What can this community do for you?
Be active, stay knowledgeable on the issues, and communicate with your elected leaders. Also, the city and the county have several boards and commissions. I would encourage each of you to apply online on the websites and serve your community on one of those boards and commissions. Because without your input, the community will be a different place. The other thing I'd like to do, take just a second to say, in order to bring these businesses in order to enhance the economic outlook for the city, we've got to have the amenities that are going to attract outside populations. So when the vice president or the president of a company that's looking to relocate or locate in Fayetteville come here, and we don't have the amenities to serve them, tennis courts, swimming pools, parks, that type of thing, it really makes the other communities look better, more attractive. So I would encourage each of you to vote. They can't say this. I would encourage each of you to vote yes on the parks bonds that are coming up March 15th. It is very important for the future of this community and our economic development. All right, I'm going to let you close, and then we'll hang out for a few minutes. Ms. Monroe in the back, sorry.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to point out that one of the initiatives that the city has as well, tomorrow afternoon at the Kiwanis Center, we'll be working with the workforce development. There are several incentive financial programs that the workforce development has in place that will actually assist small business owners in their employees hiring. And many people may not know that through the workforce development, they can actually hire their employees, and it's at less cost or no cost to that owner for 6 to 8 months. They're not paying any of those wages as the employee goes through the training. So that's also an initiative that the city has in terms of the various partners to ensure that those resources are made aware to the community.
Right.
And I have those flyers here as well for those. who
Great.
may
Can
be
folks see you on the back?
Yes, sir.
Great. Good. Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.